Live with CDP, a weekly sports and entertainment podcast live on YouTube, Facebook Live, Twitter, and on audio via Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, Spotify, and Anchor FM. Now here's your host, Chris Palme.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Live with CDP Sports Talk, Season 4, Episode 51. Live with CDP Sports Talk is brought to you by Barry Cullen Chevrolet, 905 Woodlawn Road West in the Guelph Auto Mall. Check out barrycullen.com for the newest selection of new and pre-owned GM vehicles, or give them a call at 519-824-0210 and tell them Chris Palme, aka CDP, sent you down there as well. And also, you guys can check out the new all-electric Silverado pickup truck and also the all-electric Cadillac Lyric, both now available for pre-orders at Barry Cullen, or just drop by again at 905 Woodlawn Road West in the Guelph Auto Mall. Anyways, guys, good evening, everybody, and welcome to Live with CDP Sports Talk. And I'm looking forward to my guest tonight, Meghan Hall, and she is a content creator, and she's also the host of the Indy Intercept Podcast, and also she's a writer for Multiverse Murph as well, and she's a manager at editing, managing editor, pardon me, I can talk, of the Stadium Rant HQ regarding the AFC South, and we're going to talk a little bit about the AFC South and also the Indianapolis Coast. So just bear with me, and I'm going to bring on Meghan Hall. Good evening, Meghan. How are you?
Doing really good. Thanks, Chris, for having me on. Appreciate you.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it as well. How are things in Atlanta right now?
It's cold. It's very
cold in Atlanta.
Yeah,
wow.
It was 29
what's
this
cold?
morning, so it's
29.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was a little cold,
Wow.
a little chilly. I know that's probably like nothing for the rest of the world, but here that's cold.
Right now it's 32. We do our temperature in Celsius, so 1 Celsius is about 32 degrees. I was at a football game yesterday in Toronto, and it felt about -5 because Toronto's right off of Lake Ontario, so that lake effect dropped the temperature. The breeze dropped the temperature a few degrees, so people were getting hot chocolates and trying to move their legs around in the stadium because it was kind of really the first real cold day of the year for football here.
Yeah, I can imagine. Whenever I started to watch these games, like around this time of year, I always think about them like those you guys are brave souls for being out there in the cold in those outdoor stadiums. Like I'm just not built for that.
Yeah, we had a hot, humid summer here, but now it is fall, and the Grey Cup next week is in Regina, Saskatchewan, and the last few days there in Western Canada, -26 temperature. So the Grey Cup game this Sunday, the guys better make sure they pack themselves well, prepare themselves for the cold temperatures out there in Saskatchewan. So it's Toronto against Winnipeg in the 109th Grey Cup as well, and it's a 6 o'clock kickoff. And like I said, I'm a huge NFL, CFL fan.
Yeah, no, that's pretty cool. That's definitely pretty cool.
I was going to say, how did somebody living in Atlanta become an Indianapolis Colts fan?
So I actually have to give a little bit of background here and go with me for for the story. But I'm actually originally from Texas, believe it or not. I was born in Houston, raised in Dallas, so I get a lot of flack from my family for not being a Cowboys fan or even a Texans fan. But I grew up watching football, lots of football in the house. But as I grew up and watched more and more games, I really took a liking to Peyton Manning. Just the way that he commanded the field. I mean, they don't call him the sheriff for nothing, So it was watching him command the field, and then of course it was the march to the Super Bowl that the Colts had. And I remember being at a Super Bowl party, and at this point I didn't really have a team. It was just like, hey, I like football, I'm gonna keep watching or whatever else. But I remember being at a Super Bowl party, and I'm the only one like rooting for the Colts. Like the only one thinking like, hey, they could probably pull this off. And I was like, oh, no, it's the Bears. It's the Bears. It's the Bears. Lo and behold, of course, as we know now, the Colts pulled off that Super Bowl, and that kind of, bore my fandom right there. So, over the years as Peyton left, and then we got Andrew Luck, and as he left, I stayed. So I've been a Colts fan and was definitely a Colts fan long before we got Matt Ryan, to Indy.
I was gonna say, and the Indianapolis Colts lately, since Andrew Luck retired, they've went through, I guess Carson Wentz and also Matt Ryan, and then they brought in Nick Foles. But Nick Foles, they've never given him a chance to start as a starter. Have you? Is he hurt, or there's just they don't think he's capable of starting for them now?
That's a very interesting question. I don't think that he's hurt. I think what's happening, and I would say this just very candidly, is that Jim Irsay is trying to get a handle on the Colts, and he's trying to do what he thinks is best for the team. So when Matt Ryan was struggling, not only just Matt Ryan, but the team in general was struggling. They felt like they had to make what some would call a bold move, right? So you go from Matt Ryan, kind of skip Nick Foles, you go straight to Sam Ellinger. He's young, he's a mobile quarterback. Maybe that helps avoid, some of the issues that they have. But I asked the same questions. What happened to Nick Foles? I mean, he's got clearly the ability to go out and win you some games if you needed to get Matt Ryan, to a place where he felt like he could play better football. Because, as we later found out, he had a strange shoulder. But to be honest with you, I've been asking that same question for the last couple of days myself, especially after he was inactive this past Sunday.
Yeah, because I really I'm an Eagles fan, and he basically won Super Bowl 52 out playing Tom Brady in that game and stuff like that. And I guess there's been a lot of changes with the Colts and that, and I guess we'll get to that in a few minutes. But I'm based out of Ontario, near Toronto, and I was wondering if you could just tell my audience just a little bit about yourself and when did you start getting into doing your podcasting and doing your managing editing for the AFC South and all that stuff, covering the NFL and stuff like that, and content creator.
Yeah, so the content creator actually happened within the last, I would say, probably about 18 months or so. So I've always kind of been in a role in my profession and telling stories and building those stories and, how can I help businesses tell their stories? But I really found a niche with creating content. I like to think that storytelling is kind of my superpower, so to speak. And then it really just transformed the way that I think and the way that I see the world. And so instead of ranting from my couch, I figured why not, get into something where I can a little bit more of a formidable platform. So if you follow me on Twitter or, any of the social media sites or things like that, you will have seen a lot of my rants, a lot of my tweets about the Colts mainly. That's usually what I use Twitter for. But I remember maybe June of this year, randomly tweeting out, I'm like, oh, it'd be fun to do a podcast. I'd been on a podcast years ago where someone brought me on. They're like, hey, Meg, we see you, talking about the Colts all the time. Do you want to come on and talk? And I'm like, yeah, sure. Well, then I got really heavy into Twitter Spaces this past off season. And that was a really awesome thing for me to be able to do because it was a really nice networking thing. But also it allowed me to be able to talk about my team when we didn't have Colts football. So then I became, I guess, kind of known in Twitter circles as, oh yeah, Meg knows what she's talking about when it comes to Colts football. So I got brought on more and more to talk about the Colts. So I would probably say maybe about August or so, I'm scrolling Twitter one day and I don't know if I got mentioned or something like that, but I think that's what it was. I got mentioned in a tweet and someone was like, hey, they're looking for Colts writers. Meg, you should, give this a try. And it was, lo and behold, it's Stadium Rant. So I applied or whatever else, went through the interview process with them. They brought me on and whatnot. And I spent the first couple of weeks, writing for the Colts. And eventually they were like, hey, you're really good at this. You've really taken on to this. Do you want to be the managing editor for the site? We actually need someone to step up and help, manage the content, that sort of thing. So yeah, I did. So not only did I do that, but I brought 5 guys along with me to write with me. So my writers, come on and do Colts content as well. In the midst of all that, they also told me, hey, we need someone to do a podcast for the Colts. Would you be interested? And in my mind, I'm like, I've never done a podcast. I'm really nervous. It's just an idea I've been toying with, but you know what? Let's do it. So I did it. And I think my first 2 episodes were by myself and they were a little shaky. I'm not even going to lie to you. They were a little shaky. They were not as well polished as I like to be. But by the 3rd episode, I brought on 2 of my writers who asked if they could come on. And yeah, it worked. It worked really well. So now it's become this weekly thing where usually it'll be me host on that. and I've got usually at least 2 writers, but usually sometimes it'll be as much as all 5 writers will hop on and we'll do a podcast. We'll bring people on to talk about their teams. So it's just been a really fun way for us to kind of, as the season's gone on, commiserate this wild cold season that we're having. So yeah, it's turned into something I actually didn't realize I was really good at. So.
And as for myself, I got into this podcasting based on an accident a couple years ago. I was doing volunteer work for a basketball team here, a local semi team. They needed a camera guy, so they showed me how to do camera work. They actually paid me. They liked my work. They referred me to a cable company that's major here called Rogers TV, and I started doing camera work. And then before the pandemic struck, I told my producer, I'm starting a podcast. I love broadcasting. I love being in this industry. And the first 4 months, I couldn't get anyone on. I was awful. I was doing all my podcasts by myself. And then when I finally got one guest on, it's second guest quickly reps. The more I was doing this, people started seeing my work, and I've been able to get great guests on, as such as yourself and many others. And I'm hoping to get into radio through my podcasting and doing paid camera work and volunteer camera work as well. So I'm seeing the TV radio side, and I'm also doing digital writing like you are. And hopefully somebody will see that I can do a little bit of everything in the media industry.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I mean, that's what you call like getting it out the mud right there. That's groundwork, which I don't think a lot of people realize. Like creating content is hard. It's not as easy as it's not as easy just hopping on a podcast and talking. Like this is lots of prep work before you even get here, and continually honing in on your craft. So kudos to you. That's pretty awesome.
And this is my 216th episode tonight.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
I hope I get to that. I hope I get to that amount.
Hey, like I said, people think doing a podcast, like you mentioned, is a piece of cake. You have to prepare yourself. You have to produce your shows. Booking guests is a full-time job itself. And then promoting your show on all these social media platforms is another full-time job on top of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's a lot. It's interesting because I think that before I got into it, I didn't realize how much of my time it was taking up until someone asked me recently. They were like, how much of time do you dedicate to this a week? And I'm like, I don't know, 10, 15 hours outside of my full-time job. So yeah, I mean, this is a really nice way to still incorporate the content that I create during the day by continuing to create content. It's just allowing me to continue honing my craft, which is really cool. But it's a lot of work. It's a ton of work.
Absolutely. And I went out and created my own opportunities. I've had sports teams let me cover them in lacrosse, football, hockey here. So I'm just taking advantage of any opportunities I get and not saying no to anything either.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of how you have to. I would say I've probably largely done the same that, I think I did my first couple of podcast episodes and then started getting requests for other people's shows. It was really cool to be able to do that because I think people saw that like I have a real passion for this. It's really something that I really like doing. Not only that, like a woman with this sort of knowledge on the team is not as common as say some of our other fans, and I think that that's really really cool for me to kind of be that representation and say, yeah, this person is really knowledgeable about their team and they're passionate, and they can bring a different aspect to things. So.
Absolutely. And every time I talk to a guest on here, I learn something new from my guests. And I love storytelling, being able to share my experiences and hear my guests' experiences as well.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
And one thing I've learned too, when I first started doing this, I had Eric Smith on, who's the radio voice of the Toronto Raptors of the NBA, and he just basically told me, he goes, "Chris, it's nice to write things down, but when you talk to your guests, just talk to them like you're having a conversation at a coffee shop, donut shop, or at an arena." And
Yeah.
I've taken his advice and just trying to ad lib and just have natural conversation with my guests.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say the same. I think that people don't realize that's also a skill too, to be able to think on the fly while you're interviewing someone or while you're talking with someone. I can't tell you how many times, I'll go through and I'll prep for the podcast. I'll have like the 5, 6 things we're going to talk about, and somebody will say something, mid-show, and it just completely shifts the show, and we got to roll with it. But yeah, it's a really different skill set to be able to do that. So yeah, I relate to that a whole lot.
Listening skills too, because when I first started, I was so focused on the graphics and making sure everything's perfect. Sometimes my guests would answer my question, and then I would ask them, and they've already answered it. So sometimes you got to listen really carefully. Your guests can answer one question, or they can answer five or six or seven of them.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, that's happened to me as well. I've had to completely skip segments or either come back to them or say, "Hey, can you expand on this a little bit more?" Or something that I'm really proud to be able to do, again, think on the fly. So if they've already, covered something, yep,
Yeah,
what else can I talk about? Things like that. I mean, it's definitely a craft.
definitely. That leads to my next question. Where did you attend school, and did you have any mentor or mentors when you were starting up all of this?
Oh, that's a good question. Good questions. So I actually went to undergrad at a school called the University of West Georgia. So it's about an hour outside of Atlanta. And then I did grad school at a school called Mercer University. It's a private school, and most people don't know about Mercer University, but they busted several brackets years ago when they beat Duke in March Madness. So that's kind of where I think where people think of when they think of Mercer, but. I actually got 2 business degrees there, and during my time while I was in grad school, I did an internship at IBM, and, that was really, like, probably the first, what I would say, big girl job, in the real world, and I remember I had a boss who she was tough, she was really tough, she demanded excellence, she certainly brought it out of me, and I think, she had been at IBM for 40 years, something like that. So, she had seen a lot, and I think it really helped shape, who I was as a person then, and it helped shape my, my toughness, my tenacity. I think she just really instilled in me the power of networking and how important it is to get yourself out there and be good to everyone, whether that's the CEO or the janitor. And I really appreciated that because I took that along with me after I left IBM and went on into some other roles after that. So yeah, I would say that that having someone who can actively sew in you, who took a chance on me. I was, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, kid right out of college, and to get my first, paying internship. I mean, it paid pretty well, internship back then was something spectacular. I really wasn't expecting that, and it was a really cool opportunity. So I would say then I had a mentor, and then probably the last, I would probably say 4 or 5 years, I had mentors at various jobs, including one that I'm at now. And I would say that all of them have been women. That's not to say that I wouldn't welcome a man mentor, but I think for me, it was something about having women who looked like me, to help push me along the way, or even women who didn't look like me to help me push me along the way. But just women that saw me and saw what I was bringing to the table, but also were able to see things that I just couldn't see for myself. I do think that as I've gotten further along in my career, that it's taken some time for me to kind of believe in my skills and believe that I belong in the room. I'm knowledgeable enough. That imposter syndrome is really, really strong. And I think a lot of people could probably relate to that, where you question yourself, you don't think you're good enough, but you absolutely are. And you just got to believe that you are. And you got, a good group of folks around you who also believe that.
You were just mentioning about networking. That is huge. And I've been doing this for now a couple years, and networking's actually ended me up with a paid camera work job. And networking has also got me has brought me some other opportunities. So, and I've also made friendships on top of the networking as well, contacts too.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. I would say with networking, it's been really just me being, just super friendly with people in general, just, striking up conversations or whatever else. But people like to talk about themselves. And I think we forget about that. Like, we're human. So you want to be able to shine and say, yeah, this is what I do. I'm really proud of it or whatever else. So I really like asking people, yeah, what do you do? What are you proud of? Like, what gets you up in the morning? Those sorts of questions. I've really found that that's really good to see, especially in this circle, and the power of networking as it relates to, like I mentioned earlier, Twitter Spaces, like that arena has been so critical for me in getting my name out there. But also, I met a phenomenal group of women through Twitter Spaces, who all of them are not only super knowledgeable about their teams, but they write, they do podcasts, things like that. I mean, they inspired me to feel confident that I could do this, and I still keep in contact with them now. it's just really good again to keep your head, kind of in front of you, and just be smart about the people that you're networking with, but also remember to sew into them because they're sewing into you.
Absolutely. And by the way, I ended up on Twitter Spaces in July. One of the Buffalo Bills sideline reporters, who is my one of my podcast guests, Sal Capaccio, who covers the Bills, was on Twitter Spaces. And I'm like, what the
Yep.
hell is this Twitter Spaces? And then all of a sudden I'm on there, and then he brings me on. I'm like, Sal, what's going on here? He goes, you're on Twitter Spaces. I'm like, and he goes, this is like live audio radio. And then I'm like, this is great stuff. So I talked to Sal for a couple minutes, asked him a couple questions, and then I decided a week later, I'm a big fan of the Toronto Argonauts, the Canadian
Yep.
Football League. I decided to start up my own Argo. It's called the Argo Bounce Live Audio Show, which is about the Argonauts once a week on Twitter Spaces with my co-host, who's a season ticket holder. And Twitter Spaces is great because it gives me another platform besides my podcast, which is live and audio. And Twitter Spaces has been awesome.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you just don't know the power that you have. It's been really, really fun to be able to do that. I would say also it's given me opportunity again just to mesh with other fan bases as well. Like I've made tons
Yep.
of friends across the fan bases, particularly with Commanders fans because of Carson Wentz and that connection. Hey Meg, come give us your insight. What do you think? Were you a fan of the move to move Carson? And think, whatever question they wanted to ask, I answered. Or even just this week, this past week with the moves that Jim Irsay made to hire Jeff Saturday. Lots of people wondering what Colts fans are thinking, what's happening in the building, things like that. And it's just been really cool to be able to share, one, what I think, but two, what I've read, what I've heard, things like that. So it's been fun.
And I agree with you too. Obviously, I have my favorite sports teams, but this podcast and my Twitter Spaces audio shows allow me to talk to people from people in other provinces, other cities, other sports teams as well. So it's just been awesome.
Yep, yep, I would agree. Yeah, I mean, I've met fans from from all over the United States as well, but a couple international fans, people that are there's a woman who she's a Chiefs fan based out of London, another guy who is a Colts fan based out of London. I've seen there's some fans out of Australia. Just
Yeah,
again, it's been really really cool just to network and get out there, but also to just share.
yeah.
And share, and even a lot of times we're not even talking about the Colts. We're talking about football in general. Did you see this game? What do you think about that play? And is this guy top 10 in his position? Stuff like that. I like those kind of conversations. So
Everybody says all the bad things about social media, but the way you're using it, the way I'm using it, social media, if you use it the right way, is a great tool. And without social media, I would not have these opportunities to speak to you on my podcast or my audio show or do my digital writing and that. So
yeah, absolutely. Same here. Same here.
one thing I've learned too, I'm also 50 years old, but a lot of everybody that's been in this industry, that's in their 20s, 30s, or even my age, have been so supportive of what I'm trying to do. And nobody's been like, oh, you're 50, forget it, you're too old. They're just, everybody's been really great and supportive of what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to prove that age is just a number.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's tough. I'm 33 and it's not anything that I would have thought about in my 20s. You know what I mean? Like I had to get to a point where I felt confident enough in myself to be able to do it. But I think the thing is like not only do you have to feel confident in yourself, but you've got to continue to want to have that desire. So I don't think it's a matter of age, it's just do you believe that you can do it?
Yeah,
And then can you put your knowledge to it?
absolutely. So like I said, I love hearing my guest stories, and thank you for sharing your story as well. Now, before I get into some Colts questions, how hard was it to start up your own podcast and build up your audience? Because I'm still working on that as well.
Yeah, I would say that for me, it was one, having a platform, so that was really cool, to have someone to be able to help me with it. But two, I have to give a really big shout out to some of my writers. They're very well connected, and they were able to, connect me with other people who had done podcasts, so I was able to bounce ideas off of them. But I think for me, it was, did I have the right equipment? Did I know what software to use? I'm very curious by nature, so I Google a lot, I search a lot, I read a lot. But I bought, as I went along, I bought more and more software. I bought I've got a brand new laptop, I've got a camera, I've got, a little light over here that you could probably see coming off that, just make my face a little bit brighter. I've got the microphone, I've got a mixer, things like that I just slowly added. But all that was just research on my own and just what's best practices, things like that. I will say that Stadium Rant gave me kind of a best practices bare minimum kind of guide to get me up and running, but the rest was completely me. It was, just, hey, what do I want to talk about? It was topics that I found either interesting for myself or either I'd seen, fans discussing. But then it allowed me to kind of put together my skills of storytelling, which is that's what I do. And so a lot of times you'll see me come up with these ideas for the podcast and I'll toss it out at my writers and say, hey, what do you guys think? And they'll say, yep, that's good. Or, oh, no, I want to talk about this or things like that. But not only do I have those topics, but I usually will have something to support it. I'll have video, I'll have tweets, I'll have, quotes or things that I saw, articles to support it. So this is storytelling in just a different, kind of format. And for me, it made me realize, oh, this is really good for me. So not only am I good at this, but I was good at also hosting too. So to do all that work and then to host as well is kind of a different beast. So I've got to keep the conversation going, got to play off my, my guests, my writers and things like that. It was something I didn't realize that it was a natural talent for me. So I think for me, it came a little bit easier once I got involved in it. But it's really tough. I would say that because I know, for example, I had writers on my show who came on. They were not podcast guys at all. By and far, they were just not. Now, they've probably talked in Twitter spaces. They've probably chatted up with their buddies or things like that. But getting on a podcast and talking in an organized format and things like that was not their space. But once we got done, and I think we did maybe the first episode, and we got done and I ended the broadcast and the first words out of their mouth, "Ooh, that was fun." And so you realize like, okay, yeah, I really like this. And the more that we did it, the more, comfortable that they became, it became more fun for all of us. So now it's just a weekly kind of like get together. I mean, we kind of, essentially kind of chop it up and just talk about the game. We give each other grief about things that have happened throughout the week. That includes like people changing their avatars on Twitter or just tweeting wild things, throughout the week. And I'll usually save that and bring it back up for the podcast. So it's become a really fun thing for all of us.
How many shows a week on average do you do on the podcast show on the Intercept the Indy Intercept podcast?
Yeah, so it's usually twice a week. Some weeks it might be, just one depending on schedules, but usually it's twice a week. So we record live on Friday nights and then again Sunday nights, usually after the games. If the game is on a Monday or during the week or something like that, then we'll usually record, either before or right after that. But yeah, it's basically been, just whatever was best for all of our schedules, honestly.
At one point at my other job, I was working 5 midnight shifts a week and doing 5 podcasts a week. And I found it was starting to become a little too much because I do everything. I'm a one-man crew. So I decided, one friend said quality over quantity. So I'm now doing 2 or 3 podcasts a week, plus my live audio show, plus my digital writing, because sometimes you can do too much and your quality is not as good as it could be.
Yeah, I would say that as well. The 2 podcasts a week is enough for me.
Yeah.
That's plenty right there. And then I do a live NFL show for Stadium Rant on Tuesdays. So that's Tuesdays at 9:00, shameless plug, 9 p.m. Eastern, but we do that as well. So that, adding that into my schedule was like crazy because again, I also write too. So I'm writing, 4 or 5 times a week or whatever else, and I'm managing and editing articles. So it's a lot of work outside of that, but I do it because I love it. I do it because it's fun. And I do it because I'm helping people also tell stories about the Colts. It's their passionate fans who have now learned how to, kind of essentially write for the web, which is really cool to see.
And sometimes I wake up at 2, 3 in the morning. I can't sleep. I turn my laptop on, and then something comes in my head, and I immediately write a story right like that.
Oh yeah. Now for me, I definitely won't necessarily get on my laptop, but I will pull up my phone. I'll pull up the notes app on my phone, and I will, I'll write if I happen to get up in the middle of the night, or let's say that it's a Saturday, afternoon, and something will come to mind. I'll go ahead and I'll bang out that article right there on my phone, and literally just whenever I get ready for it, copy and paste it right in to WordPress and keep on going from there. I mean, I think I've done probably at least half of my articles that way, where like maybe I'm not immediately near, my laptop or my tablet or something like that, and something's coming to mind, or I'm
Yep.
out or whatever else, and poof,
Yep.
I have written it all on my phone. Yeah, now I've got it.
Yeah, and right now I'm covering about 7 or 8 different sports. So it's like, I honestly, I love it, and, I just gotta keep working away and, grinding away at it, and like I said, I really appreciate you sharing my story. Are you still good for a few more questions?
Yeah, go for it. Go for
Okay,
it.
no problem.
Absolutely.
When I originally started this podcast, it was 30 minutes live with CDP, but a lot of my guests, fortunately, like talking to me. So a lot of my shows were going an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours. And
Ooh.
so my friend said, get rid of the 30 minutes live with CDP and just call it live with CDP sports talk. That way you're not time uh, limited. But I always check with my guests too. If they can only come on for 20 minutes, so be it. If they can come on for an hour and a half or an hour, I try to be, one thing I've learned, you'll know this as well, be flexible. Always be flexible.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, I've got time for a couple more questions. Let's hop right into it.
Okay, here's the next one. What are your thoughts on firing of head coach Frank Wright, former Buffalo Bill quarterback, former Eagles offensive coordinator, and just quick thoughts on the 2022 Indianapolis Colts overall so far after 10 games or 9 games, I think 9 or 10.
Yeah, I think this is something that had to be done in regards to Frank Wright. And it's nothing on Frank as a person. I think he's a phenomenal person. I think he's a really good person. But it's a couple things that come to mind. The Colts have never won the AFC South underneath Frank. And that's tough to see with such a really good roster. And then of course a weaker division. They've continuously had slow starts to not only the season, starting 1-4 or 1-5, but also slow starts to games, and that becomes to wear on you. I think also just there were really high expectations after the Carson Wentz experiment, and they go out and get Matt Ryan. If you think back to last season after the Jaguars game, you have Jim Irsay saying this really large, like impassioned speech right outside of the his jet, and he talks about, hey, I need people who are in the building, all chips in. And he's talking about, hey, I've got these high expectations that not only I want for myself, but I want this for my fan base as well. So when that doesn't happen, I mean, you saw it happening kind of in almost slow motion. You kind of saw that it was going to happen. Offense was greatly, greatly underperforming. And that is not necessarily Frank Wright's fault, but it is up to it at the end of the day falls on Frank to get the team prepared. So offense is underperforming. And then I think Frank, as a last inch kind of effort, hey, I got to fire Marcus Brady because, hey, he's scheming up these games. It's not working. I've got to find something. Well, Marcus Brady, is not there for the game in New England, and it's the worst offense we've seen in 25 years from the Colts. So you kind of knew at that point they were literally unable to move the ball. And I think that was just the last straw for Jim Irsay. I think that, at the end of the day, Frank will be a coach somewhere else. In my personal opinion, I think that he does much better from an OC position than he does from head coaching. And that's not a knock to him. I think he's a phenomenal guy again. But I think certainly I've had probably my frustrations with Frank as it comes to inconsistent play calling. We've spoken about that, especially because he was doing that for the Colts. And that has really kind of been the Achilles heel. So I think for him, again, he'll be picked up somewhere, and we'll see where that is. Maybe in the off season. If I transition over a little bit to what is the state of the 2022 Indianapolis Colts, um, I don't even know. I think my phrase for the whole entire season has been, "What is happening?" Because I don't know. It's been so up and down the entire season. I started the season with I think my prediction was like 12-5. Oh my goodness. As the ceiling, and then the floor being like 9 wins. I don't even know if we'll get to 9 wins at this point. It has just been that painful from game to game. And the team, although of course, we got lots of guys in that locker room who are trying their hardest, the results just haven't come. And so I think, for me, I just want to see this team finish respectably. That's kind of where I'm at now. Can we, put together an offense that looks consistent, an offense that looks competent, and as you saw probably in the Raiders game, that's the best this offense has looked in quite some time. So I would like to see more of that. I would like to see really and truly this offense have an explosion. We have not seen that yet in a game. We have not seen this offense put up, 40 or 45 or 50 points or things like that. And not that I'm expecting that every game, but it would be nice to see your defense not have to, carry as much of the load in a game. So I think that's where we're at now. And a lot of that, and this is something, you hadn't asked, but I'll speak to it. A lot of that rests on the shoulders of Chris Ballard.
The GM.
Yes. Yeah. So he kind of was almost bullish, kind of doubled down on the wide receiver core from the offseason. Hey, these are a bunch of young guys. We believe in them. But, Ballard has missed on several wide receivers throughout his tenure. And so far, I think the best ones that he's got to show for it is Michael Pittman Jr. and Alec Pierce. The rest are kind of not as splashy as those two. And so you're seeing that. I mean, Paris Campbell has come along. He's getting there. This is his best season he's had as a Colt, which is great to see. He's healthy, which is phenomenal to see for him, as much as he struggled to keep that. So I think for the Colts, it's just, can we keep, the offense looking consistent the rest of the way? And at the end of the day, I still think the Colts need to take a quarterback in the draft once we get there. Wherever we land, it's got to be quarterback. Matt Ryan is here for, at minimum, another year if you decide to keep him. But beyond that, Colts have no answer. It's been a revolving door at quarterback. You're now at 7 quarterbacks since Andrew Luck retired. You've got to find the answer.
That many, 7. Wow, I know Denver was at 20, I think, when Elway left or Manning left. And I know Buffalo went through a ton of quarterbacks after Jim Kelly retired as well. And it really, in football, really, I'm a big believer in the O lines and the D lines. But if you don't have a franchise quarterback, you're not going to win too many games in football without a franchise quarterback. So they need to address that. And you just answered one of my last questions I was going to ask you on that. So do you see Matt Ryan back with the Colts next year, or do you think he'll just finish out this year and the Colts will cut him?
Honestly, I have no idea. I honestly have no idea. And that's tough for me to say, because I did not think the Colts were going to bench him after 7 games. I thought it was a very emotional response, and I get it. The Tennessee game did not look great, but I felt like it was an indictment on really the team and less Matt Ryan. So for all intents and purposes, I do think the Colts need to at least give Matt Ryan another season, because it would help not only the team, until they're ready, but Sam Ehlinger to learn from him, continue to learn from him, and whoever else they decide to bring on. I don't think the team is convinced that Sam Ehlinger is the guy. They're not convincing me at all, and I don't think they've convinced any fans either. It was like, hey, desperation move. We need to pivot here because things are not great.
Yeah.
If Sam Ehlinger were to become the guy, great, but I just didn't see it there. And so once they went back to Matt Ryan yesterday, which I also thought that they should have as well, it was pretty clear to me. Okay, we are just trying to find something to get us through this season right now, and we can reevaluate. So would it shock me for the Colts to cut Matt Ryan? No, necessarily, and I'm only saying that because nothing makes sense this season. Nothing makes sense this season. So I think for me, I would keep him, just because, hey, he's a great veteran, in terms of, having someone who is fairly consistently stable, but you do have to do some other things if you're going to keep Matt Ryan. That is, address the offensive line at the left tackle position and at the right guard position. You have to go find you some either quality depth pieces through the draft, or go find some staple pieces through free agency. And then I think you also got to get some more weapons. So hopefully you get a healthy Drew Ogletree, because he was injured in training camp. That's another tight end for Matt Ryan. And go get you another wide receiver. You still need a really nice wide receiver 3. To me, I think, or well, I would say maybe wide receiver 4. If Paris Campbell can stay healthy, that remains to be seen. But I still think you need some more for this offense. It's very clear that we're struggling, and now that you've shipped out, Nyheim Hines to Buffalo, yeah, you need to see maybe what you can get out of Deion Jackson. So I wouldn't be shocked either to see them pick up another running back, someone else to kind of help this offense. It needs plenty of weapons. When I think of weapons, like a number of weapons, Buffalo and Kansas City is what comes to my mind. I mean, there's so many weapons to choose from. It's like pick your poison. I would love for the Colts to get to that point.
Zach Moss, I liked him in Buffalo, but I think maybe he just needed a change of scenery. Do you think the Colts will give him an opportunity to see what he can do to maybe even be a backup to Taylor?
I don't know. I honestly don't know. I have not heard any rumblings about, what's happening. I was actually shocked that they traded for Zach Moss in the trade. I thought that Naeem was just going over for a pick. I think they likely picked him up for, pass blocking protection. That's kind of some of the things that I've been seeing out of him. Um, I would be I don't know. I would be more pressed to see them have Deion Jackson step up because he's very similar in that regard to what he brings to the table in terms of being similar to Naeem Hines. So ability to catch out of the backfield, ability to run the ball. He's done that very well in the Denver game. Did that really well in the Jaguars game. Unfortunately, just dealing with some injuries right now. So I'd be curious to see what they do there.
Okay. Just a couple quick questions I wanted to ask you. This one I had to ask you. What are your thoughts on Jeff Saturday being named the Colts head coach? I know there's been some grumblings that they didn't bother with the policy of going through all the candidates and stuff like that. I just wanted to get your perspective on Jeff Saturday being the Colts' new head coach for at least this season.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me start by saying I actually really love Jeff Saturday as a person. I think he's great. I do. He's always been one of the top Colts that I like to watch, and also just to hear him being an analyst on ESPN. But I think this, and then this is something I had tweeted about earlier in the week. The Colts not having a process for this it's not necessarily quote unquote a bad thing. I think it was more so the fact that they had so many folks in the building who could have stepped into that role with the experience. And I think the fact that they were like, oh yeah, Jim Mercy is like, hey, I'm glad he doesn't have any experience. It was, oh, he's not gonna, lean into the analytics, things like that. The issue I had with it is that I would have been fine if Jim Mercy said, hey, I interviewed 5, 6 people, and hey, Jeff was still my guy, for XYZ reasons. I think anyone would have been fine with that. But the fact that you had no process and then almost were shocked that people had questions is really what bothered me about it. Is like you can't imagine that you wouldn't have a process and then that no one would question it. Not to mention it's very unconventional to do this to hire a coach without any experience. From what I was reading, it hadn't happened in 6 decades in the
Wow.
NFL.
Wow. Six
So
decades.
yeah, so that's again, it's unprecedented. So it's definitely an emotional, check for it's emotional choice for Jim Irsay. Again, trying to find what is going to jolt this team. I think what will really come of this, and this is where my opinions will probably be formed about Jeff Saturday because it's really kind of out right now. I'm not going to form an opinion off of one game. Um, what will happen in this Eagles game coming up? If this Colts team can pull out, this Eagles win, they've got the Steelers coming in after that. Like, if you can do that, I think that certainly perks up some eyes and ears and maybe quells his narrative even more. But certainly the Colts cannot be shocked that people had questions, that people were like, what is happening? There's way too many people around the league who have experience, who couldn't even get these opportunities. They got to be aware of that. They can't be blind to that. So we'll see what happens with Jeff Saturday. I certainly would love to see him, succeed, because if we found our coach, great. That saves us time in the offseason or whatever else. If
Now,
we already know, like, hey, we've seen what Jeff is bringing to the table, we've already got that. And maybe we like that. Maybe we interview some other folks and he still ends up being the guy. Great, fine. But yeah, at this point, the jury is still out for me on Jeff Saturday.
quick question: who did they replace as their offensive coordinator? Marcus Brady. I think he played in the CFL too. By the way, if it's the same Marcus Brady, I think.
No, I don't know if Marcus Brady did play, but to answer your question, they really didn't replace anyone with as OC. They asked for Parks Frazier, who is assistant quarterbacks coach, to do the play calling on Sunday against the Raiders. And I have to give a big shout out to Parks because he called a phenomenal game, really strong for being his first game, also without experience in play calling. And I think he did really well. He is I would like to say, a Frank Reich protege. So I could see a lot of, kind of those similar concepts. But he didn't overthink himself, which is really great to see. And the Colts were able to execute on a lot of those plays. So I give a lot of credit to the players, but also a lot of credit to Parks Frazier as well.
Okay. And I'm going to wrap this up. Thoughts on the Colts' next opponent, my team, the Philadelphia Eagles, and what are some keys to a Colts upset win over the Birds at Lucas Oil Stadium? And where can my audience find you on social media, and where they can listen and listen to your podcasts?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a couple questions there. So I'll answer the
Yeah.
first one. So thoughts on the Eagles? Really prolific offense. I think that it's got lots of weapons. So I would be curious to see how the Colts adjust to those. Jalen Hurts is playing some really good football, so kudos to him. So again, defense has to come with pressure, I would say, is a second. And third is that offense. Can that offense produce points to keep up with the Eagles? Because the Eagles can score in a hurry. Colts, not so much. I think that we are really reliant on too much to get these drives going. So, I think for us, it would have to be, can we get out in front? Can we score on an opening drive? We have not been able to do that. And now I think what is 11 games, 12 games, somewhere in that range. Can you do that? Can you get yourself, out there first? I think as far as upset, get to Jalen Hurts. I think you've got to force him to make errant throws. You got to that front four. So I'm looking at DeForest Buckner. I'm looking at Grover Stewart. Looking at Yannick Ngakoue. If Kwity Paye plays, Kwity, and then if not, I'm looking at Dio. So I think for me, yeah, just want to see all around clean game. The Colts can do it, and if they look at that Chiefs game, that's the one I'm thinking of in my mind, where it also was an opponent who no one thought they could beat. They did it early and often with pressure against Patrick Mahomes. I mean, you're not going to stop Patrick Mahomes completely, but you can limit him as much as you can, and they did that effectively. So would love to see more of that in this game. As far as where you can find me, you can certainly find me on Twitter. It's at the Meghan Hall. I'm on Instagram as well as the Meghan Hall. And then you can find all of our Colts content on indyintercept.com. Also, I do some writing for the AFC South, so that is it's Texans Insider, it's Duval Dropback, and then I know I'm forgetting Titans, Titans Tilt. There you go. Those are all the 4 sites that we do some writing for. So we're building up those sites right now and getting some writers in to help fill those up. But also for the podcast, it is the Indy Intercept Podcast. It is live on Friday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern and usually Sunday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern. You can find those on my Twitter account and also the Facebook page as well. But yeah, you can also find it on Spotify. So if you look under Stadium Rant, you'll see the NFL on Stadium Rant. It's a podcast network, I guess you would say is a good word. So it's got some other podcasts other than ours. So some more popular ones, or there's a Vikings podcast, there's a Patriots podcast, a Gillette Gazette. I mean, there's plenty. There's a Titans podcast as well. I mean, there's definitely lots going on there. So go find your favorite team because they likely got a podcast with really good content as well.
Definitely. And as for the Eagles, I'm happy they're 8-0, but this talk of going 17-0, I really don't care about that 17-0 record. I care about winning the division, getting the number 1 seed in the NFC, and being ready to play in the playoffs. Because as you know, the 07 Patriots were focused on that perfect season, but nobody remembers that team because that one loss, and that came to the Super Bowl Giants. So I think even if the Eagles win today against Washington, the Colts game could be a trap game because I think Indianapolis is better than what they're capable of, their record is. And 2, it's also a non-divisional game. So that could be a bit of a letdown game for them, in my opinion.
Yeah, and to be fair, the Colts have won all of their games outside of the division, which is wild to me this season. So yeah, so I would not be shocked to see the Colts pull off this win. And if they do, you heard it here first. That's my bold prediction.
Okay, and I'm going to let you go just one second. Colts are 4-5-1. What do you feel if they want to make a run at a wild card in the last 8 games? What do you feel they need to do to win to get into the wild card? How many wins do you think?
Oh, I mean, at minimum, I would think 10 at minimum.
10 wins to get them in.
You'd have to put together a string of wins like now. Now would be the time. You're already behind, so yeah, you'd have to do it now. Yep.
Okay, definitely. Hey, I was going to say, Megan, thank you so much for coming on season 4, episode 51 of Live with CDP Sports Talk. And I really would like to have you come back on again in the future as a guest as well, maybe closer to playoff time if you're interested as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me know. This was fun, and thank you for the platform to even just introduce myself and to your audience, and talking about what I love, which is football and Colts football at that. So
Yeah, no, definitely. And this is what I love doing, going around the NFL, going around the CFL, various sports leagues, and learning about other teams and other cities as well. And if you could also give me about 10 minutes, Megan, I'll have this podcast downloaded to my audio platforms and I'll send you a link to it as well.
oh, cool. Yeah, absolutely. It sounds good.
Okay, well, you have a great night, and we'll definitely keep in touch with you on social media, Megan. Thank you again so much for coming on tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Chris. I appreciate you.
You too. Good night.
All right, thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye. All right, guys. I hope you enjoyed my podcast with Meghan Hall. She covers the Indianapolis Colts. Please check her out on Twitter at the Meghan Hall. Very good content on the Colts. She has the Indy Intercept podcast show, and she does some digital writing as well for the NFL and for the Indianapolis Colts. So, guys, again, you could follow her at the Meghan Hall on Twitter and Instagram, and also her website is indyintercept.com as well. And if you want to check out the Colts website, it's www.colts.com as well. Guys, just give me a minute, and I just want to make an announcement here too. My next live with CDP Sports Talk, sponsored by Barry Cullen Chevrolet Dealership, to be announced. I am trying to get another podcast this week with a guest, so bear with me on this as well. As soon as I can confirm another guest this week, I will let you guys know as well. And again, Live with CDP Sports Talk is sponsored by Barry Cullen Chevrolet, 905 Woodlawn Road West in the Guelph Auto Mall. Check out barrycullen.com for the newest selection of new and pre-owned GM vehicles, or give them a call at 519-824-0210 and tell them Chris Pame, aka CDP, sent me as well. And also the all-electric Cadillac Lyric and the all-electric Silverado are now available for pre-orders at Barry Cullen Chevrolet. And I want to say thank you to Mark Cullen for sponsoring Live with CDP Sports Talk as well. Bear with me, guys. I'm just going to show you guys a little bit of highlights from a football game. I was at BMO Field in Toronto yesterday as the Toronto Argonauts defeated the Alouettes 34-27 to advance to the 2022 Grey Cup against the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. Bear with me. I'm going to just show you some quick game highlights from the Argos win over the Alouettes.
Eastern Road to the Grey Cup goes through BMO Field here in Toronto. Last year, the Argos could not get by Hamilton. Now it's the Montreal Alouettes standing in the way. The Argos won the toss. They have deferred. So Montreal will get the ball first. Boris Beattie to kick off, the ex-Alouette, with Chandler Worthy and a Darius Pickett back. The 2022 Eastern Final is underway, and it's in the hands of the ex-Argo. Chandler Worthy let go by Toronto before the start of the season. On comes Trevor Harris. Andrew Harris! Touchdown, Toronto! He's back.
And in relatively easily here. Nice cut there to make Sewell miss at the line of scrimmage. Andrew Harris looking like he hasn't missed a beat.
One carry, one touchdown, and the point after from Boris Beattie. And the Argos have the early lead to get the Alouettes on the board in the Eastern Final. Spotted by Zima, and perfect right down the middle.
Respectively.
Ola. Touchdown! You talked about that two-headed monster in the Argo backfield. Is their presence ever being felt today?
From Ouellette on the catch and run. Let's say these guys are proven to be a pretty good tandem in the lineup here together.
Boris Beatty for his second point after, with Haggerty on the hold. And it drifts to the right, but it's enough. Great receiver for a long time for the Argos. Wide open, left again! Tavares Daniels, who can walk home.
Total bust by the Alouette defense.
Touchdown Toronto. The easiest way you're going to see it. They catch the Alouette defense napping. And Chad Kelly, the backup QB, throws a touchdown pass in the Eastern Final to cap off a 5-play, 82-yard drive in under 3 minutes. Stand back and Antwi in the backfield. Staying in to protect. Deep ball over the middle. Touchdown, Montreal. Make it a 2-score game. Will it make it within 11 again? As he does. From 13 yards out. No problem there for Boris Beatty. Answering the Argo field goal with one of their own. 2 for 2 is Cote. Stand back to the left. Williams, stand back. Big run. Inside the 20. Could be gone. How about that? Williams, stand back. Is back in the end zone. Within a 5-point lead, they'll see if they can make it 3. Going for 2. Wide open in the end zone is Tyson Philpott. So add 2 more on the board, and suddenly, and straight down the middle, and 2 scores. Touchdown by Stanback, and now the field goal by Cote, who's 3 for 3. After the 3 gained by Ambles, it's a 2nd and 7 at the Alouette 31. 3-man rush. Bethel Thompson with time. Into the end zone! Touchdown, Argos! Curly Gittens Jr.
Watch how he gets to the middle of the field here. Beats his defender to the inside. And perfectly placed ball from Bethel Thompson.
By the way, Corey Philpott played for the BC Lions and the Winnipeg Blue Bombers.
Yes.
And those are the teams coming up next. Western Final.
Bethel Thompson has a ring from 2017. He was a backup behind Ricky Ray. Will get to start in the Grey Cup.
This time, the Argos wrote a different story from 1 year ago. They scored early, they scored often, and they are off to Grey Cup 109 in Regina.
That clip was courtesy of TSN and the Canadian Football League. The Argonauts are now off to their 24th ever Grey Cup appearance. The Argonauts are the most successful team in the CFL with 17 Grey Cup wins, 6 losses in their 23 appearances. This is their number 24th appearance. Winnipeg has the most Grey Cup appearances. This is Winnipeg's, I believe, 27th Grey Cup appearance. Winnipeg is 12-14 in their 26 Grey Cup appearances. So also, guys, the Argonauts Winnipeg have not played for a Grey Cup championship since November 25th, 1950 in the Mud Bowl at Old Varsity Stadium in Toronto. The Argonauts won that game 13-0, and the Argos are 6-0 against the Winnipeg Blue Bombers in Grey Cups, but they have not played the Bombers in a Grey Cup in a 9-team league in 72 years. So looking forward to it. Winnipeg is looking to win their 13th Grey Cup overall and also their 3rd consecutive Grey Cup. That has not been done in the CFL since the 1978 to 1982 Edmonton then Eskimos, led by Warren Moon, Brian Kelly, Hugh Campbell, their head coach, etc. So Winnipeg is trying to be the first CFL team in 40 years to win 3 in a row, and the Argonauts are looking for their league record 18th Grey Cup this Sunday, November 20th, 6:30 kickoff Eastern time on TSN from Mosaic Stadium in Regina, Saskatchewan. Beautiful looking stadium. It probably will be a little bit chilly there that day. Winnipeg will be the favorites, being the back-to-back Grey Cup champs, but there's so many stories. You've got Mike O'Shea, the Bombers head coach, is an all-time Argo Hall of Famer, and had a great career in Toronto and won some Grey Cups with them. And obviously Zach Collaros was in Argos twice and won a Grey Cup with the Argonauts as a backup behind Ricky Ray in 2012. And Ryan Dinwiddie was a quarterback for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. In the 2000 Grey Cup at the Skydome in Toronto with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. And then you have Winnipeg Blue Bomber all-time great running back Andrew Harris now with the Toronto Argonauts. So a lot of great stories between these two great franchises and the Argonauts and Blue Bombers. And I really enjoyed being at that game yesterday with my nephew. And it was nice to see 21,334 fans, I believe Mike Hogan announced. It wasn't a sellout, but it was the largest crowd at BMO Field this year. And when that stadium has over 20,000 people in it, it was quite loud, and the environment was great. And it just proves that if the Argonauts can win, which they've done the last couple of years, and they're marketed properly, fans will come out. BMO Field is a great location, great stadium, and I'm just looking forward to this Grey Cup game on Sunday at 6:30 kickoff from Mosaic Stadium in Regina, Saskatchewan. And it's only the third ever Grey Cup held in Regina, Saskatchewan, which is hard to believe. 1995, 2013, and 2022. Terrific facility, and TSN does a great job. And guys, if you want to check out my podcast from last week, I had Curly Gittins Jr. on from the Argonauts and Dave Naylor, a football insider with the NFL, CFL, on my podcast last week. But I got to thank the Toronto Argonauts this year for a great season. I love coming down to 5 Argonaut games, being at BMO Field 4 times, and covering the Argos twice this year as a media member and working up in their press box. And thank you to Mike Hogan and Chris Bilinovich and the Argonauts organization for believing in my podcast show. And also, guys, the Argo Bounce live audio show. Here's a plug here. Argo Bounce live audio show on Twitter Spaces. Once a week. This week, Thursday night at 7 o'clock with my co-host Nick Small as we break down the Toronto Argonauts' previous game, this case against Montreal, and we're going to preview the upcoming Grey Cup game against the Winnipeg Blue Bombers this Sunday in Saskatchewan. So check me out on at Chris D. Palme on Twitter, and we'll be on Thursday at 7 o'clock. I am trying to get a CFL writer to come on Thursday night and talk with me and Nick about the East and West finals and to preview the Grey Cup. So I'm looking forward to the next Argo Bounce Live Twitter, the next Argo Bounce live audio show on Twitter Spaces this Thursday night at 7 o'clock on my Twitter page at Chris D. Palme as well. And before we wrap this up, guys, I'm just going to do like I do always. Just 1 second, guys. I got so many graphics on here. Live with CDP podcast. The audio version is now going to be downloaded to iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts, Anchor FM, Apple Podcasts, Breaker, Pocket Casts, Radio Public, Spotify, Castbox, LinkedIn, Stitcher, and Tuned In. And Live with CDP podcast is now on 17 platforms, the 14 audio platforms I just mentioned, and also on 3 live video platforms such as my YouTube channel. Please subscribe if you already haven't. And also, I want to say thank you to everybody watching on YouTube, on my Facebook Live page, and also on Twitter as well. And just give me about 7 to 10 minutes, and I'll have all this podcast with Meghan Hall downloaded to my audio platforms as well. And I'm looking forward to watching the Eagles-Washington game on Monday Night Football with Joel Buck and Troy Aikman, and see if the Eagles can go 9-0 and defeat the NFC rivals, the Washington Commanders, as well. But again, guys, I want to say thank you to Meghan Hall for coming on and talking about the Indianapolis Colts and about her podcast show and stuff like that as well. And again, you can check out the Indy Intercept podcast show and also her other work on her social media pages as well. Again, so all right, guys, that's it for season 4, episode 51 of Live with CDP Sports Talk, brought to you by Barry Cullen Chevrolet here in Guelph as well. I will again let you know when my next episode is. I'm hoping to have one maybe possibly either tomorrow night or Thursday as well. But I hope everybody has a great evening. And again, thank you to Meghan Hall for coming on. And again, thank you everybody for watching Live with CDP Sports Talk. on my YouTube channel, Facebook, and Twitter, and also on my audio platforms, which I just mentioned, Apple, Google, Spotify, Anchor FM as well. And again, Live with CDP is brought to you by Barry Collins Chevrolet here in Guelph. Have a great night, everybody, and we'll talk to you really soon. And check out my social media pages and my TikTok page for my latest videos from the Argonauts game against Montreal last night. I posted about 9 new TikTok videos on my TikTok page. And if you want to follow me on TikTok, at Live with CDP. Good night, everybody, and thanks again for watching and listening to Live with CDP Sports Talk. Go Argos and Eagles.